And very quickly, I mean, I remember hearing music for the first time. Ike was, at this point, still the elder statesman, working on a piano piece of some kind. And I remember walking into the room, and we lived in South America for a year for our dad's, because of our dad's job. Yeah, woo, South America. And we didn't really have a lot of access to the music we understood, and except for a little bit of rock and roll tapes. Yeah, we just had tape colores. You're like, I have no idea what you just said.
We sang about the colors.
The colors of the fall. And I remember walking into the room, having only heard a little bit of rock and roll music from this cassette tape we had, and hearing Ike starting to play chords on a keyboard, which I think he learned C, F, and G. And I remember
our mom never actually, I don't think she actually remembers
she did show you how to play.
Teaching me how to play. I said, well, what's the key of C? How do you play C, key of C? C, F, G, okay, all right, very good. And literally, she only showed me once, and then it went down, and then, you know.
Yeah, and then now you still forget it. It's been a long time, 19 or so, 20 years.
No, those are the only chords I do remember.
But I remember walking in and just hearing harmony, just being able to harmonize, and it's just one of those things that is there, almost like, you know, you see something and it just, you know it's in the room. And you know, within a couple years after we came back from South America, we recruited Zach, who is now old enough to write his name. And
they lied to me to get me in this band. They were like, you'll get free candy bars and G.I. Joes.
It's like, yay! But incredibly, Zach, though may have been coaxed at the very beginning, he would just nail anything that we threw at him. I mean, the truth is, the harmonies, when I think about it, I'm like, you were 6 years old. God. But after a couple years of dabbling, and this is before the 20-year mark, this is at even, you know, smaller people. People would, you know, in family members, cousins, you know, gatherings with friends, they'd say, oh, you should sing. We'd sing a song. And we sort of thought, okay, now it's time to actually, we want to perform for more people than just family and friends, because we think we're pretty good. So we actually trying
to get a free meal at the pizza buffet, you know. Actually, we did that a couple times. It works.
It does work, yeah.
And maybe it's particularly effective when you're small children singing, please sir, can I have some food?
It might have helped if Zach put on an Oliver cap and then cut some mud on his face. Anyway.
They only gave me gruel. Please, may I have some chicken?
Sorry for the bad English accents. We would do this anyway. So we went ahead and threw our name into the hat at a local arts festival called Mayfest. In our hometown, in Tulsa. And we got in. And we got a little spot on the stage. I think it was 15 minutes. Was it 15 minutes?
Actually, I think it was actually 30.
Oh, there you go. He's the encyclopedia. How many minutes was it, Isaac?
Actually, technically, I think it was 25. But anyway.
But when we walked out there, we were singing all the stuff that we had learned, and a few songs we'd written, most of which sounded like copies of stuff we'd learned. With like some version of Good Golly Miss Molly with someone else's name in it. But there were a few original songs which were immediately, you know, they had a sound to them, and they were about love lost and, you know, girls cheating and stuff like that. But
well, you know, at the ripe age
it was authentic. It was authentic.
At the ripe age of 11, I mean, you listen to Chuck Berry and a few other people sing about girls, you know, leaving and this and that or another, and you're like, okay,
that sounds good. I'm right about that.
When you say that, it makes me think we had a song.
It's called
one
Rain.
of our first records. Oh well, you're about to talk about Rain, but speaking of songs about things that weren't relevant to our age, we wrote a song called "Lonely Man."
Looking like a lonely man.
At the end of somebody's like, but you're 9. There's no one to understand.
Well, see, here's the important thing. Before we we'll skip forward. So basically, what happens is we
ended up calling that song "Lonely Boy" because it didn't make a lot of sense to people besides the three of us.
But we always hated it because as a songwriter, it was totally lame.
It wasn't a good rhyme.
It doesn't rhyme. Is there no one who can love a lonely boy at the end of the day? There's no one to understand. If you change it, if there's no one who can love a lonely man at the end of the day, there's no one to understand. It's a much better song.
Hey, come on. So we very
Damn producers and their literalness.
when we started off, we did that first gig, and I think really the story of the early part. And wow, we're gonna have to move on this. We got a lot of story to tell. The story that from there of the early years was every gig we basically got another gig, and pretty quickly these kids that just thought they were good enough to not perform just for family, we're playing 2-3 times a week.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the first things we did to record was we actually went in, we did a little show, and we got a standing ovation, and immediately afterwards, I think you, at the time, looked at our guardian, our mom, walking, and said, we need to record something, and literally went at midnight one night, walked into a studio in Tulsa, and pressed record for, I think, 3 hours.
Literally on mics exactly like
And
this.
just said, okay, well, how many songs have we recorded? Haven't recorded any. Okay, how many songs have we written? And we literally went through and just sang them. And that was our first album.
I haven't listened to that album in 20 years probably. But I would guess that as it gets later in the album, the songs get slower.
Because we're falling asleep.